I think it's not that hard to understand what an employee wants from an employer. They want to be a part of something they can feel proud of. They want to know that their company appreciates them. They want to work for a company that will be there when they need them, because we want that staff member there for the company. The company better be there when they need them, not just at work, but in life.
Sure.
They want to work with other great people. They want to make sure that they have an opportunity to understand why decisions are made, and they want to have some fun. And if you can do that, if you can do that within your system, I think it's a formula for not only great business success, but you get to enjoy your leadership role when you get to work in that kind of culture.
Welcome to the BetterCulture podcast, where we make the clear connection between better culture and better business. This podcast is for leaders who want to build stronger teams, drive thriving companies, and enjoy your leadership role along the way. Now here's your host, Brett Hoogeveen, a leadership and culture aficionado, keynote speaker, and co-founder of BetterCulture.
Welcome to episode 2 of the BetterCulture podcast, where I'm going to have a chance to take us on a little bit of the backstory behind how BetterCulture became the organization that it is. And I'm excited to have with me sort of a legend in the leadership and company culture space, certainly in my book, but in a lot of other people's books as well. And that is the founder of BetterCulture and Mindset and a company called QLI, which we'll talk about. Also sort of my boss, I guess, kind of, sort of.
I've been your boss for a long time.
Yeah. And my father, Dr. Kim Hoogeveen. For anyone who isn't familiar with Dr. H, Kim's background, if you'll let me do a brief bio for you here, is originally as a PhD psychologist, later a startup, really founding president and CEO of a healthcare organization called QLI, which became a best place to work perennially, and grew into one of the larger centers of its kind. He then went off and started a company called Mindset with a little bit of help from me, and then BetterCulture with a lot of help from me. And we're really on a mission to help make the world a better place to work. So I'm excited to have Kim here for this second episode of our BetterCulture podcast, so we can tell a little bit of the backstory of how we got to where we are, and hopefully you're in for a little bit of a ride down history lane.
Looking forward to it. And heck, I mean, I'm here with a CSP, a certified speaking professional. There's only 400 of those or so in the United States. So I'm happy to be here with you, Brett, and this will be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I wonder if we could really just get straight into some of the backstory here. I know what we do today from a BetterCulture perspective has evolved a lot in the years, but if you go way, way back to when you were sort of drafted to become the founding, what became president and CEO, I don't know if you got to pick your own title or what.
I did.
But of an organization originally called Parents for Quality Living, later Quality Living Inc., and then QLI. Take us a little bit back of how that started, and really why culture, people and culture, became such an important part of starting that company and watching it grow and succeed.
You know, Brett, when I do keynote speaking now, and you get these very, very, I'm very appreciative, but these introductions about what you've been able to do and accomplish and what QLI is, and it sounds quite impressive, which is, I guess, the goal of an introduction.
I think it's impressive, yeah.
But they don't, thankfully, they don't tell the real backstory. So let me maybe take you back just a little bit to the late 1980s. I was asked by a group of families to see if I could help them develop something that would be appropriate in terms of a residential and treatment center for young adults with brain injuries or spinal cord injuries. And they approached me because I was the only psychologist they knew. And they thought, and they were wrong, that surely he's a psychologist. He must know something about brain injury, et cetera. It wasn't my area of specialty. But I agreed to meet with them a couple times. And then they asked if I would recruit a board of directors for them. And so I took a shot at that. And remarkably, some wonderful people in the Omaha region agreed to come on that fledgling board. And then I exited out of that process. Mm-hmm. I got a call after a couple of their meetings. They called and said, "Hey, you kind of got us into this. I wonder if you'd take a year's leave of absence to see if we could actually get something done." And so I agreed to do that. Now, here's the part that I say, and sometimes it sounds like false humility, but it really is. It's true. I say that I was almost the perfect person to be CEO of QLI at that time because I only had two small flaws. I didn't know anything about brain injury, and I didn't know anything about business. But other than that, I was the obvious right person for the role. Well, I had a couple things that were really formative, though, in what I decided to do. And it's not so much because of brilliance, but because of necessity. And I call it the search for the magic phase. We found enough money that I could go visit 3 renowned facilities for brain injury facilities at that time in the United States. Now, again, this is back in 1987, 88.
Yeah.
But in California, Texas, and Massachusetts. And when I went to see them, I was not as impressed as I thought I was going to be. I thought I was going to the meccas, and I came back thinking, I'm not that impressed. But I assumed the problem was that I didn't know enough to be impressed. So if I had known more about business and brain injury, I would have probably been more impressed. The other thing, and the search for the magic phase, is I had a couple influential people in Omaha who asked how they could help me. So, okay, what can I do to help you? And I said, well, I would like to get the opportunity to visit with exceptional corporate leaders. And if you just think of around Omaha, the buildings with names on them, that's kind of the who's who that they got me into those offices for a 45-minute visit. That's what I asked for. And in those 45 minutes, I had a whole set of questions I was going to ask. But there was one question that really resonated with these CEOs, and it was this: what is it that you know that has been critically important to the success of your business that it ticks you off that your own executives just don't get it? And boy, did they talk.
Oh, man.
And I took notes like crazy. At the end of all of that, I cut up all of the thoughts I had from those interviews, and although not perfect, and you always put a little of your own beliefs and philosophy into it, but I stacked similar thoughts on top of one another on a table. And I boiled them down to 7 key things I thought I had heard again and again through those interviews. And so here's what we decided to do as we started QLI. Acknowledging we didn't know much about brain injury or spinal cord injury, and we certainly didn't know much about business. There's a third leg to the stool, I think, of great companies, and that is your people.
Right.
Can you attract, build, and retain phenomenal people?
Yes.
And so because of necessity, we decided we're going to go all in from day one on building a culture that can do that. And if we can get that right, if we can attract, build, and retain great people and put them in a work environment they love, maybe we'll be able to figure out the clinical part and figure out the business part.
Did you ever figure that out?
That's really the true story. Did
you ever figure out the clinical stuff?
I wasn't much of the one that figured it out, but I had great people, and collectively we did.
Good. That's good to hear. Wonderful. Well, was it, at some point, I'd like to share a little bit of really how unique that experience was of you. I sometimes refer to Kim, he doesn't like this name, but as a culture cowboy, as somebody who was really, is really into people and culture, not because it's good just for people and culture, but because it's good for business, right? And so I would love for you to share a little bit of why maybe early on you were convinced, and maybe today you've become even more convinced on that connection, because I know in the early days you decided to go all in on culture. It worked out pretty well. Maybe we could talk a little bit of the, some of the results that came from that, maybe at QLI and beyond as well. So take that wherever you want. Maybe let's start with results at QLI. Like, how does that translate from, theory into reality from a business perspective?
One of the things that people in this leadership culture space out there are sometimes, they're almost always well-intended, but they're often a little bit soft. I'm accused of many things, but seldom am I accused of being soft. From day one at QLI and throughout everything we do with mindset, I'm competitive and I am an unabashed capitalist. Mm-hmm. When we work with our clients, we want to make them incredibly successful businesses. In fact, we want our clients to be the business that everybody else in that industry fears because they're so terrific. Well, to get there, I believed it back when we started QLI, but much more today do I have evidence to show it's true. to get there, I believe it starts with, can you build this phenomenal work environment that can attract and retain great people and put them in a setting they truly value? They think they're part of something elite. So with the business side of this, when we get that culture right, QLI's turnover rate is 1/4 the industry average. Their insurance rates are dramatically lower. Workers' comp rates, a mod rate that is 40% lower than the average in the industry. This is one of those rare times in life, Brett. You don't have to pick between building a great company or treating people well. You can have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
We believe better culture equals better business or directly leads to better business.
Yeah.
So that's the connections that we saw early, and it ended up proving out to be correct.
And there's more and more data out there as well that shows that connection. Respected large research institutions, whether that's Harvard Business Review or whether that's Deloitte or whether that's Gallup, et cetera, are increasingly getting really good and clear data out there that shows things like a great workplace culture can increase productivity by in the neighborhood of 30%, or it can increase revenue growth, the rate of growth, by as much as 2x over a 3-year period, or it will lead to customers that are 20% more satisfied, right? All of these things are important business metrics if your goal is to make money.
It is, and I know at BetterCulture, Brett, you and I and Blake and Kevin and we all have our phrases that we particularly like and the others don't so much. One that I like that I know others don't so much is when you say culture is important, I always say, yeah, and water is wet.
Right.
Great, there's another study showing that culture impacts. Well, duh.
Yeah.
Well, duh. I don't think it takes all that much research to find that if you can attract, build, and retain phenomenal people, put them in a work environment they love, they're going to be more engaged and you're likely to have a more successful business. I just don't think it's rocket science to understand that. It is a challenge to do it.
Yes. Yeah, we've seen that. And just for anyone that's listening or watching, if you find yourself on the skeptical side of that, if you think, people and culture, that's just squishy, it sounds more like an expense than something that adds to the bottom line, ask yourself the inverse, right? If you had the option to have employees that were negative, lazy, disengaged, didn't believe, weren't aligned with the mission of the organization, would that impact your business, right? If your sales team felt that way, you think they'd sell less? If your customer service team was that type of an employee, you think you'd have customers coming back to your business? Of course not, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what culture is, right? So it can go one way or the other. Either, you can clearly see if you had the opposite, if you had a lousy culture, it's really easy to see what that would do to a business. Well, the inverse is obviously true.
The other thing, though, that I think ties to this, Brett, is you can find CEOs all over the place that in their annual statements, they talk about the importance of culture and how much they value their employees. But you go in and look at that business, and it's just 2 steps above a sweatshop. and my point in that is mouthing these things is not terribly important. In fact, it actually leads to cynicism. The issue is, do you really believe it? Do your actions as a leader, all the way through your leadership system, do they give that message to your employees that you're genuinely committed to their success?
So just as a framework, okay, you mentioned this search for the magic and these 7 principles and these things. I want to riff off that for a minute and just share, again, backstory. And I was in probably middle school and high school as I remember some of these stories that you would tell at the dinner table or, riding home from a basketball game or whatever it was about things you were running into or trying to get done at QLI. And I mentioned you as a leader and QLI as an organization was an outlier in many ways, an outlier in your emphasis on culture, but an outlier candidly in the medical, in the rehab world, in the healthcare space. And one of those leadership principles, I just think this is such a clear representation, one of those 7 principles, and maybe we can expand on 1 or 2 more if you'd like to. And if you listen to the show, we're going to talk about these principles a lot, and we're going to go deep into them. But one of them that I don't get to talk about as often as I should is the first principle, which just says, if you want to be a successful leader, get seared into your head, your job is to constantly be focused on mission of your company, on culture, and on the pursuit of excellence. And I don't know why I want you to go down this lane, but I want people to get a sense of what it really takes to try to build something that is better than average, different than average from a culture, from a business perspective. And I remember there were so many things. You mentioned that those other facilities that you went and looked at early on. What I have learned is the reason that you weren't impressed is that it was kind of depressing. It was kind of, the energy in the place wasn't where you'd want it to be. And you could see that was carrying forward to lackluster business results, rehab metrics, et cetera. And I just think that your insistence on that first principle of excellence and saying, if we're going to build something, we're going to build it excellently. And when you ran then afoul of a regulation, or when you ran afoul of whatever it is, you didn't stop and you didn't say, oh, okay, if we're going to build a rehab facility, we have to just follow these rules. I got to see firsthand that was not your approach. Your approach was, no, what's the quote you like to say? Somebody between whoever it is, what bureaucrat you're talking to, and the governor.
Actually, and the president.
And the president has the ability to change this.
That's right.
Doesn't make sense. We can do better. And that adherence on excellence in every regard, I think, is so foundational and important if you want to be an effective leader.
When I went and looked at those other organizations before we'd built anything, and I came back a little disheartened, I now realize in retrospect how those organizations were developed. And they were developed from, start with a regulatory book. Start with the medical guidelines. Start with the accountants come in or the auditors and tell you how to set up your business.
Right.
Okay. And they built from those two legs. Oh yeah. And we'll have to hire some people.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And I think QLI was so different and became so successful because we built it the other way. We started with the people, the culture, and then we had another question. And this is really why we became a bit of a pain to some of the regulators. And by the way, we've met a lot of people down in Lincoln who ended up being wonderful.
Yeah.
And bureaucrats always get criticized, but we would find, and one thing about government, there's always an appeal level somewhere. But we would, on many of these things, we eventually found someone who put down the regulatory book and said, okay, why is this so important that you can't follow this rule?
Yeah.
Well, it's rules that were set up for a hospital or for a geriatric nursing home. We were working with families with average age of 24 years old, young man or woman that had been injured. And so we found people that would eventually listen to us. But we started from the premise of, if it was our loved one we were serving, how would we want it done? Mm-hmm. And then we took it one stage further is, we're going to battle for this. And it's kind of sad, but still makes me in some ways smile. Illinois twice had us come out to Illinois to help them try to develop a QLI in Illinois.
Okay.
And Brett, the second time we went out for the second meeting, we were still, the topic of the meeting, the only topic they had on the agenda is, well, who do we need to get in the room for the third meeting?
Oh,
it was
goodness.
So huge, so bureaucratic. And I came back home saying, I am so pleased in Nebraska we have just a unicameral.
Right.
Only have to get 25 votes. We have a governor that, there's only 1.7 million of us. Actually, you can get to see the governor in the state of Nebraska and say, could you just listen to what we're trying to do? And one state office building.
Yeah.
And I really don't think it could have been developed in another state. And to date, I'm still right because no other state has anything like it. But that is some of the stuff I don't usually talk about in terms of the real secret sauce behind the success we had.
Sure. Well, largest center of its kind in the nation, industry-leading outcomes, customer service, financial performance, all the things, right?
Low staff turnover rates.
And you left QLI. You retired as president and CEO at the end of 2010. Mm-hmm. And so many directions we could go here. I will just say that organization has continued to excel long beyond your time and tenure there. And maybe just give a quick perspective on what you see as the impact, the sustaining impact that this emphasis on leadership development and company culture has had. Now that you're quite a bit removed.
I'm quite a bit removed.
Yes.
When you have a unique organization that is running exceptionally well, you're frequently wise to promote from within.
Yeah.
And QLI's board was wise enough to recognize we need to recruit from within in terms of who's going to go into that CEO position. And we had a superstar right there. Her name is Patricia Kearns, took over in 2011. And the truth is, most of the time we don't want to admit this as CEOs, but when you step down from a position, you want the company to still do well. But you want them, deep down, you kind of want them to have a little problem after you leave. I mean, a little bump in the road.
You mean like notice that you're gone?
Exactly,
Is that what
a little bit.
Okay.
And the truth is, it just kind of continued to go straight up from when I left. And now we're into the third generation with Nash Mahupate as CEO. But again, Pat came up through the QLI system. Nash came up through the QLI system. They have continued on the same focus on let's build a culture that can attract, build, and retain phenomenal people. And let's differentiate ourselves. You know, one of the things early on, Brett, we were doing a lot of things when we started QLI that were not just for the regulators, but I mean, here we are in a medical industry. I mean, banking and medicine are two things that are regulated like crazy. And we were doing stuff that made us look like a cowboy. Now, I didn't come in trying to be a cowboy.
Right.
I was just saying, if that was my loved one, we would never want that done that way. That makes no sense.
Right.
But
focus on excellence.
You focus on excellence.
Yes.
And what that does is that gives your employees a sense that they're part of something unique. What we always wanted to do with our employees is to differentiate. Because long-term, the best motivator for your employees is pride. Money is important for satisfaction, et cetera. But ultimately, if you can have the staff members believe they're part of something that's worthy of their best efforts, and they're part of something that's respected and admired by others, but to get there, you have to differentiate.
Yes.
You have to differentiate. If you just blend in with everyone else, you're if average is not exceptional.
Right. Average is not exceptional. Okay, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. All right. Let's jump forward. So, Did I mention the fact that the organization that you started, QLI, was voted the #1 best place to work, not just once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4 times. We kind of lose track. At least 4 times under your tenure, I think, and then many more times after that, right?
Yeah.
So it continues to be one of the best places to work in the region, which is phenomenal. And that really is what spearheaded you, and then eventually me, grabbing onto your coattails and saying, how can I help? to take some of these ideas that built such a phenomenal, widely acclaimed workplace and culture that had delivered certain business metrics and performance. As you stepped down in 2010, more than a few other local executives had noticed that you kept being on the front page of the newspaper and best place to work and being asked to come give speeches. And they said, how do you do that? Right? What does it take to build such a great place to work? What are you doing that's different, right? And that was really the impetus for you and I consider myself a moonlighting part-time intern in those
Absolutely.
early days of Mindset. I basically was editing documents on occasion that you had written. But in the early day, we set out to try to answer that question for other companies, right? What does it take to build an amazing place to work that will deliver all these valuable benefits for your people, for your customers, for your other stakeholders, for your business and bottom line, for leaders, for quality of life, for leaders, for employees, all these amazing benefits that you had seen firsthand and that we knew were out there to be grabbed for other organizations. We set out to do that with a training and a consulting company called Mindset. Tell us just a little bit about that period.
Well, over the years at QLI, I had the chance to develop a lot of content and curriculum, and it's interesting if you want to have a phenomenal workplace culture, it's great if the CEO wants to take a lot of credit, but ultimately, Brett, that's built because frontline supervisors understand how to lead human beings in a way that is effective.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, you got to put the right people in supervisory roles, but the second is then you need to train them well.
Yeah.
Well, I was eager to have a chance to see if I could offer some of that training and curriculum to other companies. And so that was my impetus for starting Mindset when I left QLI at the end of 2010. And over the next few years with you and a couple other people on the side helping here and there, I had the opportunity to start working with a number of other companies. And for the most part, I got the chance to work with phenomenally good companies, that were interested in what we were doing at QLI. And I always smile and say, I'm kind of in a great business because it tends to have the opportunity to work with really good people and really good companies, because the companies that need us the most don't ever call. The companies we tend to work with are those that they're interested in culture, they're proud of where they are, but they're relentless in wanting to get better. How can we get even better? And they have that understanding. This connects to a better business.
Sure. Well, I appreciate some of that historical perspective where sort of you, what's the phrase? Is it made your bones? What's the phrase about learning something? Does that sound right?
I'm going to let you go with that. Yeah, sure.
Made your bones on learning about, culture and the value and leadership and all those things. But I guess I'd like to close with talking about, we did that firsthand with a lot of organizations where we showed up and we did training. We did consulting with executive teams. We would do occasional one-on-one executive coaching. And we were making an impact. We had a good core set of clients who were seeing their leaders improve. We were seeing their employee engagement improve. They were seeing tangible results from the investment that they were making, from the time they were spending. They were making great progress. And yet we as an organization felt like our impact was kind of capped.
Okay, I'm going to say a little more bluntly than you are, Brett. We had some terrific clients that became raving fans for our content. They said, "This stuff's phenomenal. Your business plan is absolutely terrible." and their point was, you guys can't scale it all.
Right.
I mean, you're limited by you guys driving around, coming in and teaching this for 4 hours or doing one executive retreat with one group of people.
Yeah.
And so that's when we really made the decision. And this was really led by you and Blake and David and Kevin, Andrea, the staff now, but said, we need to move from mindset, which is really in-person training, keynotes, et cetera, to BetterCulture, where we're going to scale this content. And we have a phenomenal, as you're well aware, Brett, we have a huge amount of content.
Yes.
That's never a problem with our with our company.
And it's unique content too. Nobody else has it.
We think it's really good. I can guarantee you only can find it from us. But we were able to take that whole body of content and put that into our online mindset leadership program.
Right.
The wonderful, I think it's an amazing 20 tenets program that we developed. Blake, our actuary, and I building the mindset culture survey, which I think is a phenomenal instrument.
It's amazing.
So we were able to do that, and now we are able to scale and to take what we know works and to offer it now to a wide array of companies across a wide array of industries. One of the nice things about our company in terms of our business is we work with so many different industries, because a commonality in most all companies is, guess what? How can we attract, build, retain, and motivate phenomenal people?
Yes.
And that's what we do.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll wrap us here.
Okay.
Maybe I just to say at the end, when we started BetterCulture, probably 2020, we kicked around what we thought our mission should be, and among the team, Kim's always been big on helping our clients become dominantly successful businesses, right?
Yep.
I maybe had a bit more, I don't know if it's, high-minded or global vision, which was just to say, could we just try to make the world a better place to work, right? And we don't mean that as just a surface level thing. We mean it because it makes a difference for so many people, not to mention the bottom line of a business, right? And what's exciting to me is the scale that we've gotten to already and our impact via our tech-enabled products, our video products, our larger events, podcasts like this, that I think, we got a long ways to go, but I think we've made we're on a path to really doing what we say, which is to try to make the world a better place to work.
It's been a great ride, and I'm convinced that we will continue to make a significant impact with BetterCulture. I'm excited to see what we can do to help other companies. I think sometimes leadership can be made a little bit more complicated than it needs to be in terms of understanding the goals. And I think it's not that hard to understand what an employee wants from an employer. They want to be a part of something they can feel proud of. They want to know that their company appreciates them. They want to work for a company that will be there when they need them, because we want that staff member there for the company. The company better be there when they need them, not just at work, but in life.
Sure.
They want to work with other great people. They want to make sure that they have an opportunity to understand why decisions are made, and they want to have some fun. And if you can do that, if you can do that within your system, I think it's a formula for not only great business success, but you get to enjoy your leadership role when you get to work in that kind of culture.
Well, Kim, thanks for being here. I know you've done that, and we are helping more and more people go on that journey and do that as well.
Thanks, Brett. That was fun.
Want to take the next step to building a stronger culture? We're offering a free 15-minute Better Culture strategy call directly with me. We'll take the time to help you identify real opportunities to make your workplace better. No sales pitch, just real advice to help you lead better. Grab your time right now at betterculture.com/free call. Let's make something even better together.